Welcome to Why Knowledge Matters. Was a member staff of the United Nations missions in Iraq and Sudan and the former advisor to the Canadian Secretary of State for Africa and Latin America and Asia Pacific, as well as a former staff of the Canadian International Development Agency. He is a founding member of African Diaspora Association of Canada. Hüstin has lectured on Sudanese, South Sudanese, and African issues in the United States, Canadian universities, Rome, Berlin, Innsbruck, Geneva, London, Slovenia, and Amsterdam. Hope you're doing great, Justin.
Fine, thank you.
What made you interested in governance?
Yeah, the issue of governance goes back in the time of the colonial system in the Third World, what is the Third World, which is in Africa and Asia, Latin America. But the governance also, the history of the governance is not actually brought from the Western colonial system to the colony. Within the colony, there was a governance system existed long time ago. People governed themselves through chiefs or sub-chiefs and so forth. Then the British, through the colonial system, the British, the Dutch, the French, the Belgians, the Germans came in and introduced the governance system to the colony. But the governance system that they have introduced was in conflict with the existing governance that was already existed in those colonies. But their governance system that they introduced is only served the interests of the colonial system, but actually never the colony. And this is true because if you look today, the world is suffering from the governance, not because of anything, but because of the conflict between you have the foreign governance that was introduced by the colonial system, and then into the colonies, and then the colony itself or themselves have not rationalized or conceptualized their own governance system. So now you have the two, the foreign and the domestic one all together. They're trying to coexist. Now, when the British left, when the colonial system left their colonies, they have not left any governance system, good governance system in place. Actually, they have left a governance system that actually creates more conflict than actually the stability in the colony. For instance, divide and rule. That was introduced by the colonial system into the colonies. And then it actually disrupted the governance system that exists in the colony. See the point? Now, on the other side, in the colony itself, the members or the inhabitants of the colony themselves fail to see why are they interested in this foreign governance system that comes from outside, rather than actually focusing on the governance system that they have. The existing has been working for a long time. That is the question that actually we have a problem here. And then the other side of the question would be, can the two be integrated? Yes, of course, can be integrated. Let's say, for instance, let's see what is good in the Western governance system. We can take it and then see what is existed within the colony itself. Let's say in the African governance system or the Asian governance system or Latin American system. See it and then incorporate. Let's see what is good from the Western system, integrate it into the existing system of governance in Africa, for instance. And then that way you have kind of something customized. Since we did not do that, it did not happen, they have a conflict, because now you actually try to copy paste the Western governance system into a culture which is not actually for it, which was not prepared for it, was not nurtured. So, and therefore, copy paste, you have a problem. When you copy paste something, you don't go through the process, then you run into a lot of problems. And that's why from the early on, after the independence, there's not a single country survived in these Western countries, colonial system. The only country that survived, integrated its system is Botswana. Yeah, Botswana have taken from the Western governance system and also did not abandon its African governance system that existed. And that's why Botswana from 1960, after the independence until today, one of the stable country in Africa. The rest is just disaster.
Why does governance matter?
It matters because, put this way, before colonial system entered Africa, there was a stability. Even yes, there was a stability, less conflict and problems and so forth. But when the colonial system entered Africa, uh, what happened? They have created divide and rule of the same community, fighting each other, killing each other for the benefit of the colonial system. So the colonial system was happy to see the disunity among the members of the colony, because if the members of the colonies are united, then the colonization project will not go further. The exploitations of the African resources will not go, will be protected. And the leadership of African leaders who are fighting the colonial system will exist, and it will try to protect the interests of Africans or Indians or Latin Americans and so forth. This is why it is important to see it from that perspective. It matters. It matters why? Because today, if you look, the same thing happening. If Africa, actually, by the way, all of the colonies all over the world, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, in India, they are not free. They're not free. After the independence, their constitutions were written by the British or the French or the Belgium and so forth. It was not. It was totally, I call it remote control independence or freedom. All of these colonies were being operated through the cliques or allied of the colonial system, which the colonial system educated them in Europe and sent them back to Africa to protect the interests of the colonial system. That's what is happening. That's why we have this conflict been going on and on and on. That's why governance become important. Because if you have a country which cannot govern itself, what it means risk for security, for peace and security. That means you're going to have a lot of conflict. You're going to have humanitarian crisis. You're going to have famine, the humanitarian disaster, and so forth and so forth. So governance is very important. Just like you have stability. When you have stability, then you rest assured that the future of the country will be better off. The people, the citizen will be better off. That is the key. That the governance is important. It's about just an order. You put things in order. You have a system. For instance, take India. For instance, India, the colonial system in India was divided India into three countries. You have first India, and then they were fighting. Gandhi was fighting for united India, but the colonial system was dividing Indians, playing cards, Muslims against the Hindus, and so forth. And then, as a result, Gandhi was killed, and then we have Pakistan, and then India was divided into Pakistan, two countries, and then Pakistan later on, you have Bangladesh came out of what? Of Pakistan. You see the problem. That's why you need to have a system whereby the governance is important, because the governance is important. Also, the British people who are elected, who are not the colonial system, dislike them. They will impose a person on the population in the colony who favors the interest of the colonial system. And that's no good, because now you're talking about a democracy. Okay, let's elect our own. We elect our own, say, no, we don't want this person, because now the person who's elected by the people for the people become a threat to the colonial system. And therefore, most of those guys are mostly eliminated. That's one case. Take Sudan. South Sudan was one country, and the colonial system introduced a system called closed district policy in 1821, whereby people from South Sudan cannot travel to the north except they have to have a permit, like a passport to move, and vice versa. Look, 1821, they took these one country, but divided into two distinct people. And then later on in 2011, you have another country was created. It's not created just by mistake, no, but it was by design, because it's already been 1821. There's no interaction. This country was already divided. It's called divide and rule, right? Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea is also another case. You have Namibia and South Africa is also another case. You might even see Sudan maybe be divided again into different countries, as we have seen in the Balkan. And Somalia, you have now Somaliland, which is not recognized, and so forth. So governance is really very important. If you wanted to have a nation building, state building, you have to have the governance. You have to have a system that runs smoothly and respects the right of everyone, and things will be done equally according to the law, or according to a good constitution. Yeah. And then the other thing also, you will find that some countries will try to perform in a good governance system. And if the governance system is working well, is protecting the interests of its nation, you will find the former colonial system will intervene somehow indirectly, try to create instability in that particular country.
Do you think Sudan is on the right track?
Absolutely not. It's worse than ever. It's worse than before, because the very reason that the people in South Sudan fought for equality, for justice, sharing of power, resources, good governance, that was the 5 reasons, and the separation of the religion formed the states. Because when the British left the country and the independence of Sudan in 1956, just very important here, Sudan got its independence before any other country in sub-Saharan Africa in 1956. But a lot of literatures would tell you that Ghana was the first country in sub-Saharan Africa. No, it is Sudan. Actually, Ghana 1957, Sudan was 1956. So just as important for the record. The colonial system, the center of the colonial system in Sudan was British, was in the center in Khartoum, in the northern Sudan. So then all of the other peripheral cities, suburbs were not connected to the center. So the British system, the colonial system, created a center whereby they have elites from Khartoum who were actually allied with the British system, colonial system. And later on, when the British were leaving the country, Sudan got the independence, then they replaced the Brits. And therefore, after that, they continue with the same legacy and the system of the former colonial system. For example, when Africa received the independence, or got its independence by through a lot of ration, one thing that you should keep in mind is that, yes, Africa received the independence or got the independence. However, the African countries or the African states have never eliminated the colonial system. Never eliminated the colonial system. What I mean by that, if you look at the state structure, the colonial structure still existed. If you look at the governance system of the British, which is divide and rule, it still existed. It was created by the Brits. Look at the structure of the police. the structure of the army, the public service, everything, it is colonial structure. That's why Africa or any other third world countries, in other countries in the third world, they are suffering from the governance because they never get rid of the colonial structure in their governance system. So they maintain it, and therefore, when you maintain such system of that which is oppressive regime, what is the result? You continue with it. That's what happened in the case of South Sudan, because the elites who took over from the British, they maintained the same colonial state structure, as I just mentioned to you, and therefore the same discrimination, whether by the color of the skin or the religion, what all sort of this discrimination, inequality, structure of this new state continues. So what happened? They inherit from the British, and now the Sudanese elite who went to school in England, continue with the same structure of the colonial state. Now South Sudan is split from Sudan, and the same elites in South Sudan also continue, they inherit the same system of governance which was in the former Sudan. That's why you see this mess in South Sudan. Since it got its independence right away, 1 year or 2 years, the country went into the civil war. Not only civil war, become even ethnic civil tribal conflicts. So you see, governance is very important. But the problem, we did not deconstruct the colonial system of governance in Africa. And number two, we have never incorporated the local governance that were existed in these colonies integrated into this new governance system of colonial system. Okay, I am in the view that we should have filter, we should have a sifter. We should have taken what is good from the Western democracy and what is good from the African governance system according to each country, and then you customize according to your need, because no one size fits all is not a good way. Or just to a copy paste of the Western democracy in a certain country in the third world does not solve the problem.
How would you address deconstructing the system?
To deconstruct, this is a long process. You need to have at least 3 elements. Number one, you have to have phase out process. Phase out, I mean by now, this current leadership, you have to kind of push them out. Okay, but you have to find a way how we can push them out. But the most important thing in all this, the baseline should be, or the foundation, you have to establish foundation. You have to have a very good education. First, people have to be educated. Once people are educated, not only because there is 2 different views here. Yes, we have a lot of Africans who are educated, went to school. But the problem in Africa, you ask yourself, okay, how comes is it Africans, they have the minerals, they have everything. And they have people who have great PhDs from great universities worldwide. And yet when they come back to rule or to governance, they never govern the Africa, okay, or South in this case, but they rule the country. So there's 2 different things. What we see in the third world, people ruling the country or the states, but they never govern the state. So for you to govern the state, you have to have a good education, and just not to be educated, but also you have to, when you're educated, what I mean, go to school, not just having a degree. It's good to have a degree, but you need to translate this degree to the practicality. For instance, in Africa, we have many graduates went to school. The difference between our graduates and the other graduates is that the African graduates, they went to school to graduate, to have a job, to get a position, but never to contribute to the knowledge, never to contribute to solve the problems. Okay, so that's the key. If you just go to school just to get a job, then too bad. But if you go to school, yes, to get a job, but at the same time, you have to contribute to the body of knowledge, to contribute to the development of the country, to contribute to reduce poverty, reduce crime, reduce dictatorship, and increase the governance, increase the sharing of power, develop a good constitution that respects everybody, deliver the service. Then you have checks and balances, okay, and everybody is represented, whether youth, women, and all that. Then your education makes sense. But if your education just to get a job and then to oppress people, then too bad. So now, um, that's the second part. So you need to have a face out, pushing these people out. And how do you push them out? You push them out by participation. You have to have a participation in the system, the current system does exist. You have to participate, get in there, and then you start to change the system from within. That's number one. And number two, you have to create a good education. That education, you have to teach people not only to just get a job, but for them to participate in the system so that you prepare a future leadership. And future leadership they should have a mindset or concept of or ideology of a leader should put the interest of the nation first before his own or her own interests. What we see in Africa or in the third world is that the leader comes to power and put the interest of nation somewhere behind, or dash it in the dash bin, and then personal interests become the business of the day. That's the biggest problem. So we need to train a new leaders. I can call them a servant leader who come to serve the people, but not to terrorize the citizen, kill the citizen, rob the citizen, rob the natural resources, and smuggle the natural resources to foreign countries, not for the benefit of the country, and safe haven of the public money and so forth. So that's the second part. The third part would also will do by the African themselves. They have to realize that they need to, for these things to happen, they need to depend on themselves more than to depend to the outside. Somebody should tell, okay, you should be you should be doing A, B, C, D. But if you have a problem, you have to take the initiative to solve the problem yourself or come with some solution. And then the outside help will be only a minor, just to support you to move forward. But if you put all of your eggs in one bag and say, okay, the Western world is going to solve your problem in everything, then you are really running a big risk. The other thing also, which is very important, that we should also see other countries who have developed well, let's say Korea, Japan, China. How do they do that? So you need to go and maybe study these models of this country. Says, okay, let's bring this model here and then see, let us test it and do the same thing in our country. But that requires somebody who has an open mind and he can translate the education that he have received to the practical life. Yeah.
Why does governance matter in the future?
Okay, governance matter in future for simple reason. If you look at the world today, we have more wars today, more conflicts today, more civil wars today. People die of hunger, people die of poverty, people die of the sicknesses, and because of lack of governance. Because the government is not delivering the services for the people. Even look today, take at Europe, migration now to Europe. Why is it? Because lack of governance. Because when you have a good governance, then you have a stable country, service delivery with its health, education, and everything. Nobody will try to think to go outside. But then you see all of the third world countries wars. One war, you have war. Let's say take the war in South Sudan. It's split to Uganda. It's split to Central Africa. Then it's split to Congo. It's the same war is spilled over to Ethiopia or Eritrea, right? And then you have you have a conflict in Chad. It's spilled over to Sudan. You have a conflict in Libya. It's also split over to Egypt. It's split over to Sudan. And then you have war in Central Africa. It's split over to Congo or to Chad. again to South Sudan. You have in Uganda, Lord Resistance Army. You have in Eritrea, you have in Ethiopia, a group of Tigray. So you have, if you look at the center, the center of Africa is all conflicts, all conflicts. So why? The simple reason because of the governance. So if there's lack of governance, if there's no good governance, then this will continue and it's going to continue in the future. Then that is a threat to the security and peace. It's also a threat to the development. It's a threat to the human being. It's a threat to the new generation that we're going to be coming in the future. So you'll be living, you will be born during time of war, you're going to grow in war, and you will die in war. Take example, the Balkan, the Bosnians, the Czech Republic, and all this. Today, they are more stable, and they have a dividend of this peace. Okay, but that would have not happened if there is not good governance existed. They are not perfect, but they're in the right direction. Take example of Botswana. Example of Botswana. Why is it stable from 1960 until now? Because of good governance. Okay, so that means you have less conflict. Senegal, another stable country also since the independent. So you have less conflict. So governance is important because remember also governance is important because it limits the corruption that becoming the pandemic, another disease or virus in the third world countries. They are rich. Third world countries are rich, but you find out they are rich, but the citizens are poor. Why? Because of mismanagement of the natural resources, mismanagement of the revenue from the natural resources, whether it's from oil, from cocoa, from what. Why? Because lack of governance. Then you have a country very small like Switzerland, your own country. It's rich with everything, but less resources. How comes? Because the model of Swiss federalism is one of the best. Yeah, it's not perfect, but one of the best. Solve problems. Everybody is incorporated into the system, and system works better. It can be improved, yes. So if we're going to talk about the future of the countries to have peace and stability, then governance issue has to be addressed. It has to be taken seriously. The other dimension to it also, the Western countries, they have to respect the interests or the views of the third world countries. Rwanda for 25 years now. Rwanda is doing very, very, very well. Tanzania, but you will find a lot of this war also, this conflict in Africa, is facilitated by multinational corporation who have vested interest to exploit the natural resources in these African countries by arming the rebel groups, creating this instability, peace and security issues, so that at the same time you're focusing on war, then they are at the behind the door, exploiting and stealing and taking the minerals for less than $1 a price, and then selling out the international market for a couple $1,000. You see, so those are the issues. So if we're talking about peace and security, then the Western countries also are responsible. If we're talking about the governance, the Western countries has more responsibility because some of those ungovernable countries part of the conflict because of the support, whether their weapons has been flown in by the Western country, manufactured by the Western countries to create this instability. And then when you have this instability, if you have this dictatorship, if you have these people, this lack of governance, then you create this scenario of conflicts. So in order to have a world a better place, then the Western world also the Western country has to have some sense of responsibility, of ownership. Let us limit the importations of the weapons, landmines, and so forth into the third world. That will minimize, and let us support people who are trying to promote a good governance and supported them. so that the country will have a better future. But it's not what the Western countries are doing. Most of them are playing backdoor politics that actually encourages the division, the divide and rule, encourages the dictators to actually stay in power, encourages the corruptions, encourages this what do you call this remote control the African countries by the former colonial system. Take the Western countries, the issue of SEFA in the Western countries, in let's say Cameroon, or most of them Cameroon, Senegal, and all this was Anglo Francophone. They deposit their money into the French banks, and then for them to retrieve the money, they only entitled maybe to less than 25%, but this is their money. Haiti, the same problem. Haiti has been going on for a long time. So okay, they say for you to have a freedom, so you have to buy your freedom. How do you buy it? That means the French government always intervene in any system, governance system in Haiti. If there's any governance, any government that comes become a threat to the French system, then that government will not survive. But you have to have somebody who is a puppet to the former colonial system, then he will be supported by the Western countries to stay in exploitations of the resources of this person for the benefit of the Western world. If you look today in the Western countries, all Western countries advanced, benefited, or in terms of development, anything at the expense of the African natural resources or the third world resources. What is India? The same thing. But most now, Africa is the biggest area where the exploitations most. If you look also, the most of the European countries were built at the expense of the colonial, at the expense of the colony. Okay, resources were transported, people work for free, and all of the revenue, their labor, their dividends benefit the British, the French, the Belgium, the Dutch, and so forth. Take the African Americans in the United States. They built a country. They work for free, and yet 400-500 years they're still poor. And somebody called them poor, but they're not poor, because if they have been paid for their labor, they will not be poor. So now you have another system, governance system, also within the democratic system that we respect, but there's still some people that have been left behind. Take the governance system, you talked about the human rights law. Most of the colonial system or the colonial system members went to Africa without a visa to colonize, to steal, to rob the Africans from their resources and so forth. And yet the Africans now want to go to Europe. They say, okay, you need a visa. But come on, 1954, 1920, and so forth, you went to Africa, we had a visa. Why should I come to Europe now with a visa? And now, and if you look again, why we have this migration from Africa to Europe, the situation was created by the governments of the Western countries, especially the Europeans. They created that scenarios. They created that they supported one regime. They supported this dysfunctional government, and then this functional government never provide the services that is supposed to provide for the people, and then the citizens start to find another way, another refuge somewhere else. So that's part of the problem. If you say the governance in the future, then if the governance in the future, it is kind of is a puzzle. So what you did here, you're gonna reap the fruits of it. So now the fruits of those migration of the refugees, this migrant in Europe, as a result of the failed state, and the failed state as a result of the Western world facilitating or supporting the regimes in Africa, it to favor them at the expense of the Africans or the citizens. And therefore, they should not complain, because if you don't want these migrants to go to Europe or to your country, to France or Belgium or Germany and so forth, then make sure that you don't facilitate, don't support those regimes in Africa, and help to establish a good governance in these countries so that you'll have less migrants in the future. You have less conflict in the future, and then we have less money to be spent for peacekeeping, actually, where there's no peace, actually. We're supposed to be spending money to prevent wars. Okay, we should have something, a system in the UN called a Department of Prevention of War. Not peacekeeping, because in the first place you don't have peace. You need to prevent, and then say I'm gonna keep the stability, make the countries very stable. But we do the opposite. So we have a prevention of genocide. But what is the cause of genocide? The cause of genocide is conflict, correct? So what we should be doing, we should be stopping the elements that actually creates the genocide or creates the violence or creates the war. When we stop it, then we don't have a genocide. You cannot climb the tree from top to bottom, but you climb the tree from bottom up. So now you see the governance system in itself has a lot of requirements. Take another one. You talk about the governance system is important in the future. Talk about the international system. Take the P5s, the 5 countries that govern the world in the Security Council. Is it fair for 5 countries to make decisions about 194 countries? Why can't we have a system of election? Everybody should be invited. No. So the UN itself is not even governing by the right body. Why is this only decision being by the 5 countries? Why not by General Assembly? So UN itself needed to be reformed, because the governance system of the UN even is worse, is bad. So you need a reform to the UN so that when the UN talks, it can talk in the right way. But you cannot say to a government, so no, you want equality, you want democracy, you want a good governance, and yet in the UN itself you have 5 countries governing the whole world. It's just a show, a shit show. You see the point here? So it is have a lot of puzzles together.
Your favorite book or author and wishes for the future?
I think my favorite book, especially for the Africans, since they're the victims of their own, and victims, they double standard victims. I think I should encourage them to read the book of Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, which published in 1954, Africa Must Unite. And I think the book has a lot of good governance elements. It just needed somebody to implement it and to conceptualize it, internalize it, and say, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. Africa now, we have created more dictators in Africa than ever before. We have more conflict today in Africa than ever before. Kwame, in the book, focuses on the governance system. He focuses on the economic development. He focuses on education. Those 3 things. And then he said the independence of Africa, the independence of Ghana is meaningless if all other African countries are still under the colonial system. And he had contributed a lot to liberate the other African countries to become free. The idea of the African Union is one of the guys who spearheaded the African Union, the African Union, which was previously called the Organization of the African Union. So the thesis of Kwame Nkrumah of the book was very simple, that Africans should have only one president, and the rest of the presidents will become governors of the states. We'd have one currency, one market, develop the economy through industrialization, manufacturing system, and improve education, and so forth. This is the thesis of Kwame Nkrumah book. But yet, in 1963, in Addis Ababa, most of the African leaders went against Kwame Nkrumah idea of that. Why should I go back? I came in as a president, and I'm going to lose. I will be going back as a governor of the state, and I'm going to be losing 21 gun salute when I travel to the UN or any other countries. But now you look, the bad governance that we had in 1963 until now, Africa was not stable. Because of that, we have still going on and on. If they have buy and implements that idea of Kwame, of one single market, single currency, one president, and then the president will be rotated based on seniority, we would have not having this problem. In 2000, I think 2007, Gaddafi wanted to do the same thing, but it failed. Yeah. So again, divide and rule is still being remote control or being implemented.
Thank you so much, Justin. It's been great to have you.
And thank you for having me. Thank you for this chat. And hopefully we'll meet sometimes in Ottawa or in Montreal.